Welcome to Inner Power Particles. I'm Farhad, the host of the podcast. We talk with entrepreneurs and leaders about how they have solved the challenges in their life or business and how it has transformed into new inner strength in them. And with this, we want to help that you also can look at your life or business situations and see how you can solve the challenges in them and through that transform them also into new inner strengths, inner power particles in you. Enjoy the show. Hi Martin.
Hi Farhad.
Thanks for coming and for sharing your time in this interview. I want to start with a simple question. Could you share with us what you do today?
All right, so my name is Martin. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Monetizr, and what the company does is we bring brands into video games, and we do it by creating these branded experiences in video games. So not your typical annoying ads, but instead engaging experiences with brands. That's what we as a company do, and what I do in the company, my main role is sales on the brand side, so brand sales. But of course, in a startup, you do a lot of stuff on top of your primary role.
So do I understand correctly that what Monetizr does is, if I would use a parallel from movies, it's product placement, but you are intermediary like Google AdWords, but in games industry, right?
Yes, correct. Like product placement is a good analogy. Of course, one difference maybe from product placement is that we are a programmatic scalable channel, so that if you think about product placement in movies, then if you see a product, then what we can do, we can change what that product is depending on at a later stage. So it's not preset to that one product in that one movie forever. But let's say you create a movie and then you can change that product depending on who the advertiser is later on.
Mm-hmm. And to understand a bit more about your business, who is involved? Is it like game developers and then the brand owners, or with whom do you collaborate?
Yeah, we have a two-sided marketplace. On one hand, we have the brand advertisers. So that's where we work with the big consumer packaged goods brands. That's part one. Those are like the advertisers. And on the other side, we have the game publishers. So those are the companies that make games, that publish games, produce games, and we focus on the mobile games. So we have these two sides, and then Monetizr has a service and a product in between that connects those two and helps to facilitate this relationship.
Okay, so this means that if I own a brand, which is maybe, am I correct to say it doesn't matter what type of brand, is it financial services or retail goods, then if I want to reach my audience through games, then you are the place to go.
Correct, yeah. So we are the place where you as a brand, you can reach your target consumers, and you can not only show them your ads, but also get them to engage with your brands through mini games, so these playable experiences, in-game placements, and things like that. So that it's not like one ad that you see, but it's an experience with the brand, which you go through, and then at the end of the day, once you finish the experience, you get also a branded reward from that brand as a thank you for engaging.
Okay, this makes it interesting. And what type of games are we speaking about? Is it like Xbox or mobile phone, or what type?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this stage, we focus on mobile games, and typically the casual, hyper-casual games. For example, if you go on the App Store or Google Play Store, go on top free games, then those are the types of games that we are integrated in.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. How did you get into this? Are you a gamer yourself, or what's your story?
Yeah. So my co-founder and I, we used to be gamers quite a lot when we were growing up. Now it's a little bit less, but still we play some of the old stuff and some of the new stuff as well, but not like super intensively anymore. But how did we get into it? It was an iterative process to come into this business model. We started with a slightly different business model that only involved the game publishers, not the brands. But then over time, that business model evolved so that we also included the brands and then completed that loop of the value flow, money flow. The business model essentially evolved through iterations.
So you are two founders.
Correct.
How did you start, and when was it? How long are you in it?
So we started the business in 2016, I think October 2016.
7 years ago from now.
Yeah, so it's been a while. we joined the first stage was we put together an MVP of our product, which was very MVP-ish, something that we didn't really need almost any programming. We just used existing no-code tools, this and that, Zapier, Shopify, and things like that we connected. We created a very simple prototype. We interviewed, I think, over 500 game developers back at that time. Like literally interviewed, had calls and meetings with them to understand what do they care about, what's important for them. And then we built this prototype. Then using that prototype and those interviews, we had some proof that there's something there. So we started applying to different accelerators, incubators, and we eventually got into one early stage accelerator in the US.
Which one?
It was called Uptech Ideas.
Okay.
And then we went into that one. That was our first money. We moved to the US for a while, and then that's where we started the company, 2016, yes.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So you are in the US and starting the company. And why together with this co-founder? And can you name the person also?
Yeah, his name is Andris Merkulovs.
Yeah.
So we had, before we even met, we knew about each other, but we had never somehow connected. And I knew we both had our own startups, which were in the app/game space.
Before that.
Before. And we were both unknowingly struggling with monetization or monetizing those apps, because both of us, again, we didn't know each other back then, but both of us had apps that were doing quite well from a user point of view. Like we were able to get users and grow the user base to pretty significant numbers. But that monetization phase was always very tricky to navigate. It was always like this, like the status quo, the industry practice is to use ads, but the moment when you start using ads, then there's not a very good way how to integrate them. Plus, all of a sudden you start getting lots of negative reviews as soon as you launch those ads.
Yeah.
We both had that kind of an experience. And then later when we started working together, we very bonded about this, first of all, this startup mentality, but also about this problem that we both faced.
Yeah, but how did it happen? How did you start working together?
We met at a previous company where both of us worked. We were essentially employees in a company, and we bonded very easily and very fast. And somehow that led to experimenting, brainstorming, having sometimes meeting on Sundays, hacking things together, trying to see what works, what doesn't work, just trying to see what can we build, what can we do. And one thing led to another, and then actually it was one of the potential clients that we were speaking to, because in the very earliest iteration of the MVP, we didn't have the game aspect in there at all.
Yeah.
But then one client that we spoke to turned out to be one of the vendors of Candy Crush, of King, which is one of the top mobile games of all time. And one of our meetings, he mentioned that, hey, something like this could be beneficial for games like Candy Crush, because we're exploring that vertical, but no one has really done that, so there's no really good solutions.
Yeah.
And that's how we actually connected that together with our past, together with our love for gaming. And sounds like games is the place to go. Okay,
so 7 years have passed. Where are you now?
So great question. We have evolved. The business model has evolved. So essentially, we have done a pivot at one point. It was in around 2020, right when the pandemic kind of was starting, and we were realizing that the previous business model, we got some traction, but at the end of the day, it was a nice to have, not a must have. Mm-hmm. So we were struggling with getting the gaming companies to actually integrate our product, and the product, by the way, was to create these custom merchandise products that we were able to sell right inside the game and make the products unlockable at a certain level. So you become a VIP player, you unlock something, you buy something. That was the previous product. Okay. We pivoted from that to
can we stop here? So 4 years in the business, you understand that this is not flying and you need to pivot. This is the moment where many founders would say, okay, 4 years, no exit, thank you, bye. Like, what was the decision-making process for you guys? How did you, let's pivot, let's put another 4 or 5 years in?
It was a tough decision. First of all, I think like truly being honest to ourselves and honest between each other and within the team, because we had, I think, at that time we had, I think 5 people together. Still super small, but it was not only us. There were also some people who were like working together with us.
Investors also?
Also investors and mentors, and like through this accelerator program, because that first step was that UpTech Ideas program.
Yeah.
But then we got accepted into Techstars. Techstars is a very cool, one of the top accelerator programs in the world. So we were very fortunate to go through that program as well. And we had accumulated like investor network, mentor network, so many people who have helped us to get there.
Yeah.
And it felt, I remember in 2020 when Andres and we were discussing, okay, what do we do?
Post Techstars, right?
That was post Techstars.
Yeah.
It was like the pandemic was literally like starting around that time. And there was all this uncertainty about, hey, what's gonna happen? Like all of a sudden, like we're gonna be locked in, and before that, we had spent a lot of time in the US because we had to be where our customers are. We had to like face-to-face meetings and stuff like that. All of a sudden, all of that was going away. And so, anyways, there were big changes for all of us, I feel like. And at that same time, we had, I think we had like maybe 6-7 months of runway left, when we really decided, okay, this last business model, we're done trying. It's not scaling. It's not going where we want to be. It's a nice to have, not a must have. And the moment when we told ourselves and really started like believing that, okay, the next step is imminent, we need to do something. Then I remember we had quite many sessions together, like brainstorming, what do we do? Do we close this company? Do we create a new one? Do we go back to work for some other company? What do we do? We definitely did not want to go work for another company. So we definitely knew that we want to continue doing what we love and kind of trying to solve that same problem. But it was very unclear, what is it? So what do? We have a little bit of runway left. And what we did, we went back actually to our notes from Techstars. We had plenty of notes, both in physical form and on digital form. And especially those notes from the mentor program. And Techstars did this really cool thing. In the first couple of weeks of the program, they create these, which is called like, this thing is called Mentor Madness. When within 2 weeks, you have 10 business days over 2 weeks. And each day you have 10 mentor meetings, like essentially from the area, from the very like successful people from that area where you're in. Like Techstars has many programs. We were in the Atlanta program in the US. So like essentially over 2 weeks, you meet 100 people from who are like CEOs, CTOs, like very successful people from the area. It just happened to be that when we went back and looked at the notes, a lot of those mentors that we ended up building very close relationships with were from the marketing side of things.
Yeah.
So CMOs, Atlanta is a home for Coca-Cola company, Delta Airlines, Home Depot.
And what happened?
One theme really stood out from those notes. And that theme was, if we have this access to these so many gamers through the games where we have integrations with, there's so many brands that are looking for audiences in games, because games is something cool. Games is something where the brands are not really present. And that branding theme was so clear when we looked back at those notes from like a couple of years ago. And then we decided, okay, if we have 6-7 months left, let's create a hypothesis. And the hypothesis that we did was, okay, if we can find a brand that would spend at least $50,000 with us on an in-game advertising campaign, our hypothesis was that we will be able to find a game publisher through our network and essentially fulfill that campaign, make it successful. And we did. Long story short, we did.
So you made a decision to do this test, let's call it.
Yeah.
So, and the test proved true.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I mean, you went out, and so where and how did you, and whom did you get as this test client?
Yeah. First of all, we didn't know who. Okay, so essentially, we opened up with this test. We opened up a whole new side of the business, the brand side, which is something we never had before. And we here is, I think it's important to note that Andres's background is also in agency space. So he used to work for Omnicom and OMD, managing deals for brands like McDonald's, Nissan, Bridgestone. So he had that experience. So he was actually very helpful too. He used his experience as a brand manager before to fine-tune, help me and us fine-tune that value proposition to the brand side. But I was the one who was actually going and mostly selling, trying to get this brand to pay us $50,000 for a gaming campaign. And what I did back then, I created like these hypothesis ICPs, ideal customer profiles, which I thought based on what I had read would be the most relevant customers. And then I actually created this weekly cadence of testing one ICP per week. And I did like cold reach outs. I asked for warm introductions from our network of investors, advisors. And essentially I did that for maybe 2 months.
So, and what happened?
And then I got introduced, actually I got a cold LinkedIn connection with a innovation title at Procter & Gamble.
And wait, you had 6 months runway, and for 2 months you were getting nothing, yes? So
yes.
Like, okay, 4 months left.
Yes.
And then you get introduction with Procter & Gamble.
Yes, we get an introduction. We got this connection with the innovation title at Procter & Gamble. And it just happened to be that they have this like innovation pilot program that they run as a company every single year. There's a batch of pilots that they run. And we just happened to get connected at the right time when they were setting up the next program. I think that was in probably somewhere in, I got the connection in maybe February, and that program started in May.
So they basically when your runway is ending.
Yes, it was like a very tight timing schedule. But yeah, we got connected. They did a whole lot of due diligence about us as a company.
Yeah.
And I think it helped that we had been around for a couple of years. So
yes.
That was definitely good.
But I guess there were some sleepless nights for you as well at the time.
Oh yes, many.
But wait, okay, through that they became your client, right?
Yes, so they did a pilot with us. One of their brands did a pilot with us.
Were they happy?
Like we're jumping many sleepless nights later and many months later, but yes, they were. That pilot was very successful.
Okay, I have several more questions on all this story. How did you survive? Because I understand this 50K wasn't for you; it was for the advertising budget.
Yeah, so like I think the total budget was $76,000 for that deal that we agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially, okay, so long story short, we participate in that program. There's a pitching event to all the Procter & Gamble brands that want to participate. Then they set up these specific meetings with a couple of brands who were most interested. I think there were 3 brands in the beginning, and then essentially they decided that, okay, one brand, Charmin, which is a toilet paper brand, would be the one for this test. For maybe 2 more months, we were working together, essentially bi-weekly meetings with the Charmin team to set up the campaign, to agree on the objectives, KPIs, what we're going to measure, how we're going to know whether this is going in the right direction or not. We did that. In the meanwhile, I had this other challenge. Remember how we also needed to have a game publisher. And that game publisher, it turned out that the number, like essentially that scale that we needed for this campaign, essentially for us to be able to spend $76,000 on an advertising campaign, our publishers, the ones that we had integrations with, were not big enough combined to spend this kind of money effectively. Otherwise, it would have been very expensive. So I had another challenge. I needed to find another publisher that was big enough, that was fast enough to do this kind of a deal. While I had this Procter & Gamble like setup going on, I also had to take care of the publisher side and do publisher sales. Okay. So that was a whole different story there.
Okay, but maybe am I assuming right that this is already a bit easier game because you're basically coming and saying, okay, we have money, we want to give you money, let's do integration.
It definitely was easier because of that reason, but second also because we had been working on the publisher side for these 4 years already. So we had a much better network with publishers, and also a much better like understanding what are their challenges, how to speak with them, that part.
All right, let's come back to this also, but now I want to speak about a bit about what was happening inside the company and in your inside you guys. So you are almost out of money and going on the last months of the runway, still no sales, then you got one potential pilot. How was the mindset and how were you? Because someone could approach it like you wake up in the morning, oh, huge jolt of stress, and then you. So how was it for you and how did you survive this period? And also maybe one more, just to add in this, because if you pivot and then you fundraise, your valuation hasn't grown too much. This means you will dilute quite a lot. And this again adds to the mindset and how it all feels together.
Lots of things there, yes. First of all, I feel like just let's take into account that, okay, that was the second half of 2020 when we were all locked in our homes and like everything was different all of a sudden. I feel one reason actually why, which helped us in some weird way, like obviously since we're running out of money in a relatively short amount of time, we cut down our spending as much as possible. It was the pandemic, we canceled our office spaces, I think also salaries, stuff like that. We were cutting down on everything because...
You cancelled salaries or
not
you
entirely,
reduced?
but we reduced as much as possible. And at that time, I think we were, one person left and essentially it didn't work out. So we were 4 people at that time. Yeah, a little bit less people as well. But we really stuck together very closely and we all decided that, okay, it's either saying, okay, this is not working, we didn't get to work this out, let's close the company, or let's try this thing that is on the table all of a sudden. So what we did is, I remember we decided that Andres is going to focus on trying to getting like essentially an angel investor to extend our runway a little bit.
Okay.
So essentially fundraise based on this newly found opportunity. And I'm going to focus on this sale, to making sure that Procter & Gamble is happy and finding a publisher, making sure that they're happy and essentially figuring out a way to make this deal happen. At the same time, we had our CTO, MJ, who made sure that technically it would run, and our designer, who again helped me to figure out how to make the proposals, how to make the assets for the brands, the publisher, all of that stuff. So we were 4 people.
Okay, for this all to work, someone or everyone needs to have quite a lot of optimism and this positive, forward-looking attitude. Was it you or was it someone else? So how was it for you in this sense?
I feel like for all of us, it was just that belief. Oh, first of all, we had built and we are building and we had built already back then that core team. Like I feel like it's very robust and very close from a relationship point of view and also from a business point of view. So we had that. I think that definitely helped. And then on top of that, there was this, I feel like this deal, this $76,000 deal that all of a sudden was there, and it was like, hey, I had a very high confidence that we would get this deal, and all I needed is that publisher side to make this work. And I think that client that was willing to pay like a significant money for us at that time just somehow gave us all the confidence needed, and it was definitely tough. It was like so many unknowns, but I feel like it gave us confidence that for like these 5-6 months we're gonna see it through and figure out how to make this successful.
But this is once you got this client, I'm wondering, so for this period till you got the confirmation from Procter & Gamble, these few months, this calls for mental resilience and optimism, but at the same time not ignorance, yes, because you were fighting like hell, I understand, doing a lot of things in a proper manner.
It was a very painful experience, but it was not the first painful experience. So we had a very near-death experience before, which was even closer. Like there was something in like 2018 or something like that. I have a screenshot on my phone where our company's bank account has $58 in it, and I'm in San Francisco and I can't pay for my night for the next night. I feel like that was the closest near-death experience that we had, and somehow we had gotten over that. So this one didn't feel as bad. We had these, for other people, like 4 or 5 months, it seems like almost at the end, but it was, at least internally, it didn't feel like that. It felt, we have some time. Because I had that $58 experience.
Okay, all right. And how would you share so since this 2020, when you started working with Procter & Gamble, what have you learned? What is this value that you are giving to the brands? Like why is, I understand Procter & Gamble is still your client and there are more brands that you are servicing.
Yeah. Well, the main value is essentially reaching and engaging with younger audiences. And that keyword is engagement, because the problem that these big companies like Procter & Gamble and also others that are in this consumer packaged goods category, they have historically relied on all the possible ways of advertising, right, that you can think of. And they have always been more about showing the logos versus actually engaging with the consumers. So these new generations like Gen Zs, millennials, their habits are like very much different from older generations before them. So they don't respond and they don't engage with the ads as the older generations did. There's this shift happening where a lot of these older companies are finding themselves in a situation where, yes, their advertising strategy that had worked for decades before, it's still working on the older generations, but they're underperforming very dramatically on the younger generations. So they need to figure out how to build relationships with Gen Zs, millennials.
Makes sense. Yeah, I totally relate. If I had a business dealing at mass with Gen Z, makes sense to use your service. Let's turn a topic a bit. You mentioned that you have a co-founder. Are you two founders of the company?
So initially, generally yes, but initially we had a third co-founder in the very beginning. But things didn't work out and we broke up with that co-founder, which actually it was a very scary experience and a very, for not only us but also the couple of other people that we had at the time, it was a very transformative experience to go through that founder breakup.
This is a very repetitive situation in companies at one moment, to break up with the co-founder or to try to fix the relationship. Can you share what have you learned from that experience of breaking up?
One thing I would say is that this this radical transparency between especially the founders and generally between the company, early employees, and as far as you can take it is key. So radical transparency. By that, not holding things inside, but figuring out how to talk about things that are not sometimes nice to talk about, that no one wants to hear, but still figuring out how to make those things heard. That's one. Second, I would say also doing, as soon as you see a problem or some kind of a conflict brewing somewhere inside, start addressing it and deal with it as fast as possible, because the longer you delay it, the more painful it's going to get, and the more messy it's going to get, and the more unhappy everyone's going to be, and the more it's going to spill over to your employees, investors, mentors, all of that. So do it as fast as possible. And what else?
How do you know, is it the situation where you want to fix it, or is it the situation where you want to break up?
That's a good question. I feel like, and that's where you need to have an honest conversation about what do you want as a person, right? What is your internal ambition? Where do you want to go? Because we realize that it's just that this internal ambition, this goal there, what do you want for yourself? We actually had slightly different answers, all of us.
So what you're saying is that the breakup is not because I don't like you or I don't like how you dress, but because I want these things and you want those things and they are not compatible. Is it so?
Yeah, I feel like it comes down to one person being, because of some, let's say, if you want something very bad and if you know which is the direction and you have a couple of people, like, okay, everyone's direction is going to be slightly different, but as long as they're as unified as possible, it's good. You can work together effectively. But if one person has their view a little bit angled differently, then they will just make decisions that the others will not understand. And for the others, it's going to be like, what is going on? Why?
Okay.
That's conflict creation right there.
And what are those things that we are talking about? What is it?
I think it's like, for me personally, from a feeling perspective, it's what are you willing to sacrifice to get to where you are? Like, how much of your comfort are you willing to give away? Things like that. And like, how much of the essentially, I feel like for me the most significant and painful part is this dedication and sacrifice when it gets hard, because people who are not aligned to where the company is going, I feel like it just, they sooner or later they start prioritizing their comfort over the things that are hard, and that's the moment when you can't achieve the goal, which is hard by definition.
I see it so that there are those layers of potential alignment or misalignment, but we also need to understand those layers for ourselves. Like, first is the purpose or why I'm doing the things, and second is the vision. What am I creating? Is it a 100 million company? Is it a billion company? Because if it differs for the co-founders, it's hard to go together, at least after this 100 million valuation. And then the third is the values. Like, for someone it's the family is number one, for someone it's health, for someone it's the success, yes, and only then the strategy, like how we achieve the things. And it takes self-search also to answer these questions for ourselves, even like this. And you are now together with your other co-founder, with Andris, for quite many years. Can you share a bit, how is your collaboration? What have you learned? Maybe also what struggles you've had that you've now managed to approach differently? Or there have been no struggles at all?
Well, there have been many struggles. I feel like anyone who says otherwise is either foolish or lying. There have definitely been a lot of struggles, but I feel like those struggles have matured our relationship to a point where, yes, sometimes we argue with each other, and then that's a good thing. That's essentially, to me, that shows that both of us care about this. But I feel like these struggles have taught us to figure out a way how to not get like stuck in those challenges, but very quickly resolve those challenges.
Can you give an example, like what has not been working for you in the collaboration, and what have you learned through this, and what has changed for you?
Yeah, okay, so one like very typical example, I remember this was when we were in the Techstars program. We had some Google coaches come in, and this most memorable lesson essentially, or framework that I remember from that time, was how to give feedback. Before, both of us, we didn't know how to do it. When do you do it when you see something is wrong? How do you verify that what you feel is the right way to do it? Because there's so many unknowns. So there's like a lot of times it felt very personal and very brutal, and then the other person gets defensive, and then there's a conflict there. I remember that this framework of how to give feedback and what words to use to prepare, that was very helpful for me, specifically in my relationship with Andris. Essentially, the main goal is that you don't make it personal, but you let the other person know that you're going to be giving feedback, and you're going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, so that you're not saying that they're bad or they made a wrong decision, but you're just letting them know in a gentle way your perspective.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily, doesn't mean that your perspective is the right one, but if that bothers you, then probably the other person needs to know about it.
And why is it important even? Can you share? I know it's maybe somewhat stupid question, but still. Why is it important to share this feedback?
Because everyone has I feel like this diversity is a value, And that's again come back to the values, right? Like it's a value that we share, and respect is another value, trust is another value. So it's just I feel like you can make a better decision overall, and if you make these tiny adjustments along the way, if you just make those adjustments based on what you and only you think, then you're very biased. But then the more people that you involve, the more smarter you can essentially eliminate subjective mistakes from your decision-making process.
Okay, so what you're saying is that for you personally, it has been development to be able to give this feedback and criticism to the co-founder.
Yes,
Is it?
It is. And also, for example, for me personally, previously I was way more, I guess I'm the kind of person who always prefers to have everyone around me being like happy and comfortable, and I'm not the kind of person that wants to, like, in a pushy way challenge others. So for me, when I see that, let's say Andres is doing something and I don't agree, sometimes it's, for me, I had this hesitance before to say this out loud, because I was like, oh, I don't want to make him feel bad because he's been thinking about this, he's been like working on this, so I don't want to come in here and just make him feel bad. But this framework and this feedback giving helped me to overcome this hesitation and make it heard. So
Yeah.
I think that's my learning, one of the big learnings there.
So to be okay to feel uncomfortable, to be uncomfortable for the other person, at least for a short term.
Yeah.
This is interesting because quite often I hear this, that in the two people relationship, which is also a co-founder's relationship, sometimes there is this struggle that people feel uneasy to share criticism. It of course depends on the personalities of both sides. Not even criticism, but just like to voice what I want, what I need. And this is important to share these things.
Yeah, and then that framework helped me to, I think for both of us, for me, it helped to overcome this fear of making the other person feel bad.
Yeah.
Because it gave me a specific framework to give this feedback, even though maybe it wasn't positive. It was in many cases, it's a negative feedback. So it helped me, but also for Andres, he's this other type of person who is more direct, and sometimes he is too direct, and he's essentially the opposite from me from that perspective.
Yeah.
And then I think for him, this helped to understand how can he frame whatever he's giving feedback about, so that the other person actually feels better, even though it's harsh sometimes.
By the way, how do you, together with your co-founder, how do you align on the big things, or are they naturally by default aligned always?
I would say that we are pretty aligned naturally. How do we get there sometimes differs, like the approach differs, and then we sometimes talk about that, and that's where we sometimes have disagreements. But I feel like on a very high level, we are naturally pretty aligned on the big picture things.
Okay, that's cool. That's why maybe you are together for so many years.
Maybe.
But speaking of years, so it's already year number 7 in this company, right?
Yeah.
How far ahead do you feel you have the battery to, or you haven't even been thinking about such type of questions? Because there's sometimes also the mindset about certain time frame, then either the founders or the investors want that the exit happens. So what's your take on this?
I feel like I'm speaking for both of us. On the big picture, we know that we have not faltered, or we have not we don't have any second thoughts about whether or not we're onto something. So I feel like that is the reason which keeps us motivated, and not only us, but the team. So there's this essentially in 2020, when we did the pivot, we found this new reason to believe that, hey, there's something big here. And I feel like because of that, I don't feel like we are tired, like we're excited about that opportunity. And I have never really felt, I don't know, I have never really had second thoughts about whether or not I want to do this. I don't ever think about that.
Okay, so meaning I feel that what you're saying is that you don't even think about things like exit or what, when just you're building the thing that you're excited about.
We are, I would say we are thinking a little bit about that. So we have talked about that quite a few times with Andres, just to align on where is the goal.
Yeah.
Of course, like right now, it's maybe on one hand, it's not something that we can just like very quickly achieve, so it's more inspirational, but at the same time I feel like these exercises have helped us to understand where is the point where we will ask ourselves, do we sell now or do we keep going?
Yeah, and then you also need to align with investors, by the way. And I know you have fundraised. Was it a seed round?
Yeah, we just a couple months ago we closed the seed round.
Yeah, I know it's a bit fresh, but still, can you look back? And I will ask this way: once you got more money in your bank account, do you see now, looking back, that did you make some mistakes in how you allocated this money, how you started spending this money already in retrospect? Meaning, the question is, what are some of the mistakes that you see that you did, others might be doing, that in retrospect can share, hey guys, pay attention, don't do it this way? Are there some things that let's hope your investors are not listening to this
No, I feel like
joke.
No, but this is, I guess, one thing that immediately comes to mind is that again, it's hard for me to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. But the thing is, I feel like for a long time we were too scrappy, because like Anders and I, we were very self-critical. So we, from a spending perspective, from a budget perspective, for a long time, we were like literally spending as little money as possible, to a point where it was creating a lot of inconveniences in our lives and our employees' lives, and generally like that feeling of that you're always scrappy. I feel like we went a little bit too far with that. And and that's why it's hard for me to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because maybe if we would have been a little bit less scrappy, we would have gone bankrupt a while ago, and then that would be a different story. Or maybe we would have created.
But what do you mean? Did you like rent a 10,000 square foot office, buy company cars? Like what changed?
No, I would say that we just essentially started paying more attention to this, and paying more attention to like how the well-being of the employees and also our families, for example. Just again, by this I don't mean overspending immediately or going to the other side of the spectrum. But if your question was what would you have done differently, I think I would have tried to pay bigger respect to the scrappiness, and then essentially not be as scrappy as we were.
Yeah.
Because
okay. This is
why I would say that it created a lot of tension that maybe we would have averted if we would have been a little bit less scrappy.
Yeah. If you are saying that you started to pay yourself just normal salaries and maybe buy coffee in the office.
And even, I don't know, things like normal like monitors in the office, like things like that. Because again, it's a thing that if you're too scrappy, you don't spend money on that kind of stuff. But after a while, you realize that also your productivity is way lower when you're working on either a laptop screen or something like that. It's just not as productive.
I absolutely think that, first of all, a good master has good tools. So speaking of the office or equipment, anything that has to be good, and also to pay decent salaries, it's also just normal. I'm not speaking about like upscale market salaries, but normal salaries, just so that you are not constantly worried or unhappy that hey, we cannot afford for our family just like normal things. I don't know, in the shop, so that in the shop you don't have to look for the discounted products only when you are already in the post-seed stage. These things are normal.
Exactly, but that's the thing. I feel like for me it's hard to say if we would be here if we wouldn't have been like that before.
No, but there's a period when it's proper to be in that period, but not very long, otherwise you just burn out.
Exactly.
but still, usually when companies fundraise seed, next thing they do, they go out and hire people. So can you share any reflections? How was your approach? What has worked, what hasn't worked? Some tips for other companies who are going to raise seed round, what to focus on, what to not do?
Yeah, good question. I feel like this is a question relevant to anyone, anywhere. Regarding hiring, we've definitely made a lot of mistakes there. And I feel like the big mistake is overarching big mistake is not firing fast enough. I feel like it could have been much better if we would be faster with both hiring and firing. That is definitely one mistake where I feel like we burned time, money by not making that decision faster. Because we were trying to justify that decision with more data. To collect more data, you need more time. It's also, of course, it's very painful and like.
Meaning you felt already a decision, but you were
Yes.
trying to justify it with data. Yeah?
Yes, feeling was there, but the data wasn't there, and so maybe one overarching advice is hire fast and fire fast if you don't feel like it's working out.
Hire fast and fire fast.
Just move fast with it.
Yeah.
Because it's in a startup is generally I feel like it's very difficult to hire. It's very difficult to find the right people at the right time. Because imagine if you're, let's say, a 3-person team, the moment when you hire the 4th person, that 4th person has an enormous impact on how everything will work.
So he has to be great fit for
Yes.
the role, the company culture, for the team, everything. What's your now experience? How do you get the right fit? What's the advice there? How do you know that this is the right fit?
We couple of things. One is we're using this hiring method called the A-player method. So we're following that, and it's a very detailed set of hiring steps and what kind of interviews, what kind of questions to ask.
Okay.
How do you dig deeper? How do you identify things where you essentially you have some yellow flags, and then when you see those yellow flags, how do you dig deeper to verify whether or not this culture fit, this role fit is there, for example.
Anything else?
Also reference calls, something that is very important, and especially asking the person in this very specific phrasing, like what will who are the last 5 bosses that you worked for, and what will they tell me? How will they rate your performance in 1 to 10 when I speak with them?
Yeah.
And that's the moment when sometimes in the interview process people are that something changes, because all of a sudden, if you don't ask this specific framing, letting them know that you will speak with them and they will give you a number, I feel like that's the moment when this realism hits.
Yes.
And I feel like people, also that moment is very telling.
Okay. All right. Also, I sometimes see that a mistake that founders are doing, they hire someone who looks very good on paper and sounds very good in interviews and even is good by references. However, they are not so much into supporting this company and these founders, but they are into, there's an opportunity to build up my career through being part of this company for a while. And there I would recommend usually not to hire such people, because again, as you mentioned, boat is small, each oar is very important. Then it's important that these new ladies and gentlemen are also you can sense that they like you and they want to support you personally, because there can come a moment when there's, okay guys, sorry, runway is out. Like 3 months without salary. And you want them to be there because, yes, I want to support this company, these guys.
Yeah, the why question, of course, is very important. And I feel like it's just, again, finding in a startup kind of person, and by startup, probably up until, let's say, you're maybe 50 employees or maybe a little bit, like it's somewhere in that range. I feel like there's so much uncertainty, and that person has to be okay with that uncertainty and be excited. So if they will be excited, if you will have a great fit with that person, I feel like it can work out. But if that person is there only because of some like personal reasons, or like they see this as a stepping stone to something next, it's just that you have to ask yourself a question: how easy it's going to be. Like, first of all, like how much time you're going to invest in bringing this person up to speed with everything, and then how long are they going to be here, and take the worst case example and a scenario, and then ask yourself, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Ask yourself, and this is not a data question. You also previously mentioned what you feel is the decision that you already want to make, but then you're looking for data. Can you reflect on this a bit, like this inner voice or intuition? To what extent is it or not important, and how to use it for good? Because it can also mislead. So anything from your experience with your intuition.
Okay, this is my personal challenge. I would say I have made the mistake where I don't trust my gut enough. And maybe for other people it's the other way around. But for me personally, it's I want to see that data to support my gut. And then that's why I'm like trying to find that data piece. But at least in most examples that I can recall, the gut feeling was there. First of all, it was right, and it was there way before the data was there. So if I could trust my gut feeling more and take action earlier, I feel like I would have wasted less time, less money, less frustration.
But still, if you describe it this way, this means that you are much more connected with your intuition than you used to be in the past. What has been the journey, meaning how, or if someone who's listening, I also want to be more connected with my intuition, then your advice is what?
My advice is try, just for some context, I come from a family and like my upbringing was very logic based. So for me, I feel like this trusting my gut and trusting illogical things, it has come very difficult. And it has not been easy to justify things just because I feel like that. And essentially how I feel about this now is that I give myself permission to trust myself and try illogical things. It doesn't matter whether it makes logical sense or not, but I just try to put myself in positions where I try it and see how it works. And even for little things like buying something that you just want. You don't need it, but you just want it. And just have that experience. Give yourself that gift of seeing, okay, does it actually feel like that or not?
This is good point, meaning you can start to train up your skill of listening to intuition using situations where the outcome is not so important to you. So maybe not whom to hire or how to pivot, but instead which shirt to wear today, not which logically fits, but which feels right today, right?
Exactly. And when you're, I don't know, in a store or somewhere where you have these, you just feel you want something. Just sometimes give yourself that gift of experiencing like this, fulfilling that want. And that actually feels so good that I feel like it's so empowering, and it's so like somehow gives your soul so much energy when you allow yourself to get what you want. Not what you need, but what you want.
Yes. And also what I know works in developing intuition is to start to listen to your emotions. So what do I feel at the moment? Am I angry or joyful or sad, and why, and what is making me? So just to pay notice to this, because this is also not the logical information. Like how I feel, it's not logical, it's emotional reaction. Moving to conclusion, a few last questions. You mentioned you've been in the twice in 2 accelerators. What's your experience? Because I know accelerator basically it's funding, network, mentoring. I'm interested in the mentoring part. What's the value that you've gained from it? Or what is the mentoring for you in general?
I think it's personally, I find I find that mentoring part to be very valuable, because I feel like that what accelerators can give you is they can plug you into a network that you did not have before, and they can do it very quickly. Like this Mentor Madness example from Techstars is exactly that. 100 people from like literally 2 weeks. Of course, realistically, you're not gonna have a great relationship with 100 people all of a sudden just like that. But what you can do, and I think what founders must do, is they must like work on those like figure out who the most significant relationships are and work on those relationships. I've seen many people, many other founders who have gone through the same thing, the same exact experience with the same exact people, and that, let's say, a couple months go by and they have nothing from that, right? I've seen that, but we have always, I feel like we have created a very good relationship with those people, and even though that was like how many, like 4 years ago now, we still, like, many of those mentors have become our investors. Many of them are still like helping us with introductions, advice, brainstorming. Like, it's something that you have to really take advantage of. And if you don't, it will just go away. But if you do, then you can have so much value out of it.
Okay, but now after 2 accelerator experiences, you are also in the 3rd in mentoring program in Cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
Why that experience, and what's the difference? Or is it just a repeated experience for you?
It's not a repeated experience. I feel like in the typical accelerator, like Techstars, for example, it's more that connection is more like again business based, more focused on what kind of connections that particular person can give you and help you with, or some kind of business decisions or business modeling questions, like things like that, something from either their network or their professional life. That's more or less focused on that side of things. Whereas in Cocoon, I feel like the mentorship program is way, like, it's deeper than that. It's not only the business side, but it's also the personal side. And your personal blocker is something that you're essentially helping you uncover the reasoning or some kind of deeper level of why you have certain challenges and how you can help you overcome those challenges. I feel like that's a very fundamental difference between what accelerators do and what Cocoon does with mentoring program.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how do you feel about yourself if you look at yourself now versus a couple years ago? How have you changed as a person? Or what is different today?
Great question. I feel like I have understood what are my strengths and weaknesses a little bit better. I have a better understanding about that, and for me personally, I have also that has helped to trust my decisions more. That has definitely helped, because if I have understood and identified, okay, these are areas where I feel very strong in, then I feel much more confident making decisions in those areas. It has, like, putting these things in perspective has really helped me. That's one. Also, I think it has helped my relationships to be more, maybe, to find ways and have these different perspectives from different people who are also successful in each different field. It has helped me to foster and strengthen the relationships that I have, both on the personal side and on the business side. Yeah, I think these two things, the relationships and trusting my gut and having self-confidence in doing things is where I've changed the most, I feel like.
Okay, and I want to also highlight still throughout your story, what I hear is this sparkling optimism, looking on the positive possibilities, not giving up, determination, really great strengths. I wish that each startup co-founders team would have one person with this skill, with this setup.
I feel like it's not something that one person can give. One person can have an influence on that, but I feel like it is something that the
you
core
guys
team
together
needs to have.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if one person has it but 3 other people don't have it at all, then
yes,
it's not working. But you're right from the perspective of, I feel like everyone within a team can bring something to the team. And whether it's sometimes those are, again, logical things like a certain expertise or a skill set or something, but at the same time, just as important it is intangible things like bringing fun into the work environment. This kind of optimism, as you say, like, that is much harder to measure than a skill set or, hey, I know how to code this specific language or blah blah blah. These things are much less tangible, but they are just as important, I feel like.
Yes, I think the super good skill of coding something, if you switch off the life support 1 month before you get your big customer.
Yeah. Well, but exactly. And I feel like in a startup, you're going against all odds. That's first of all. Like by definition, odds are that you're going to fail. And I feel it takes a certain type of people together to look at those odds and say, I'm going to try anyways. Right? It's like the statistics tells you that you're not going to succeed. And if you're that kind of a person that trusts the statistics so much that you feel like, oh, it doesn't make sense,
Doesn't
then you
make
probably
sense to start.
yeah, it doesn't make sense to start.
Yeah.
So it takes this optimism. I feel like it needs to be there in order for you to do something, because Henry Ford said it doesn't matter whether you feel like you can do it or can't do it, you're probably right in both cases.
Okay.
So that's like the motto that I always remember.
Cool. Let's end on this. Thank you, Martin, for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.